Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming. I'm Dell and this is From the Depths Designer, where we are looking at a couple of items that came up in the campaign, just so that we can continue on. So, first of all was the little ships with drones we created, which we got a nice little line up here. That's why they're a little awkward. When they went upside down or got tilted around, they got basically they went turtle and could not right themselves. So I have looked at a couple of options for this. One suggestion on the forum, which I have taken into account, has been the use of propellers facing down, which are set each for the roll reverse right and roll reverse left, pointing downwards on the respective sides. Remember, this is upside down, so right and left is the other way around. And then a PID controller, which is inside here somewhere. There we go. There's a PID controller there, set to roll, and just some fairly conservative settings. Doesn't need to be anything great, just to test them out. The other setting I've used, which this one over here is used, is to put a balloon out when it goes upside down, which helps to right the vessel the correct way. Oh, there's a block missing on there, doesn't matter at this second. Now they both got advantages and disadvantages. They do add a little complexity, but nothing too much. And if you haven't played with PID controllers, we'll possibly look at those at another stage. Now, the one thing I do like about PID controllers is in normal use. So if you're cannon firing ships, they will help to try and stabilize it a bit. So that could be an advantage. But just as a quick test, let's just quickly release all of the ships. They will. Now they've all gone upside down. Now this is one little problem with the balloon. It does tend to give them a bit of a wheelie, but once it turns around enough, it will pull across. The one with just the PID, unless it gets something to put those propellers into the water, they actually have no effect. Now this one here actually has both. Now, unfortunately, it's got itself a bit jammed up, but once it can free itself from the other ship, hopefully at some point, it should, the balloon will right it enough so that the actual PID controllers will have effect. And this one hopefully has got knocked around enough for the PIDs to work. Typically, of course, yeah, you can see it's tried. They are fighting each other at this second. But the other two, as you can see, have just about righted themselves. There we go, without too much of a problem with just the balloons. These two are just fighting themselves. I think the one with the PID has finally got itself around. Well, it did actually finally right itself. Took a little bit longer than expected, but it is a slightly different vessel, so I think its balance was slightly different to the others. But it did right itself with the aid of the balloon and the PID. So between the two of them, they righted up. So that's just a self-righting mechanism for the ship. So the key bit for the balloon is off-center. If you put it straight in the center, when it is upside down, it won't actually turn it. So you need to make sure that the balloon is at least one block to the left or right, so that when it pulls it up at an angle. But anyway, that's cured that little problem, and we will update the vessels in the campaign as our drones to use that little effect, or use that ability just to make sure they right themselves a little better. Okay. The next part in this particular video I wanted to look at is we want a new sort of mothership to attack the other areas around us and take the drones away from the base. Now, I was thinking of using the monitor, but it can't actually give the drones any power or ammo, so they won't be able to go with it. So we need to build a new reasonably large ship. So the first thing we're going to do is think about what are the primaries we need to worry about on this new vessel. So we've got the three elements of a ship: speed, armaments, armour. Speed, not worried at all about it. It's going to be an item which the other ships will sort of follow, but we're not really worried about speed so much. Let's see, what else have we got? So armour is going to be key. This is going to have to soak up all the damage, and now it's going to do that with a fair bit of armour, obviously, because that's the name why it's called armour. But anyway, possibly 3 layers of armour at the side, a casement in the centre, and potentially, let's think, it's going to have a lot of resources on board. And lots of repair drones. Hopefully some of the drones will also repair it during battle, with any luck. So that'll be it, and that'll be its primary, is defense. We might even put a few shields on it, but I don't want to rely on shields at this stage of the game. It also will take a lot of power to put a load of shields on this, so we'll maybe put a few light shields just to stop the annoying shots that might be coming in from some of the deep water guard rather than anything else. Let me just see how many I've done there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 16. Yeah, that's about right. Then next stage will be, it needs to be able to hold a lot of resources and produce a lot of power to supply all the drones that are going to be around it. So that's going to use up, that's going to be the priorities. Armaments, primarily defensive and long range. So we'd give it a couple of big long range guns, maybe similar to the Monitor, but a bit bigger than the Monitor. So they're just long range, high impact guns, but most of the weapons will be short range defensive against anything that gets close and past our drone ships. Its primary role is to survive and supply the drone ships, not kill off the enemy. Maybe defend the drone ships with some anti-missiles and anti-torpedoes and that type of weaponry, rather than necessarily a lot of offensive weaponry. Right, so armour. Let me think here now. So what I'm thinking, this is going to be maybe a bottom level. We might have 2 decks to this. One bottom level, which will be the main area for steam engine. We'll go for steam engines and resources. Then a gun deck where we've got some the turrets and maybe some other smaller weapons. Now armour. Let's think. So let's see. We're gonna need an area in the centre, which is where effectively the steam engines are gonna go, and they're gonna need about 3 wide. Let's say 5 wide. So yeah, 5 wide. So you've got some space down by the side of them, and then we can put a layer of armour through there. So that's going to be the casement area, and then we'd put I'll put a metal block there to donate some armour. We'd have a air gap. Then we'll have, yep, I think another wood sort of armour area, and then finally on the outside. So we'll do that here. We'll have our final metal armour. So I think that will work. So the main armour, although that's only one metal, 2 wood beams, which isn't fantastic amount of armour, but one element is we've still got to keep the resources reasonably low. We've not got an unlimited amount of resources to build this ship. So although it's going to be quite large, I've got to keep this of a reasonable cost so that we can actually spawn it in. Otherwise, yeah, that'll be pointless if I can't spawn it in because it's too expensive. So let me just get a basic hull area and the centre casement going. Although, actually, what I'm thinking of here as designs is go a little historical, a bit of a history, in that we might go for something which is, there was an earlier version of ships which were called turreted ships, which were basically a combination, or a combination of some of the early sailing steamships, but they had the turrets, etc., of like a Minotaur. So they were a bit of both, really. Then we had, and it was before you had the true battleships or the dreadnoughts. This was like a halfway ship in some ways. Then you have, and I'm trying to think of some names. I think the captain, I'm not sure, warrior. So that might be the design. So this might be partially steam driven as such, and partially sail driven, because we're not worried about speed. So I might just put some sails on it, just as a why not type of situation. It's also a halfway between the history of the eventual battleships we'll be looking at, and and dreadnoughts, etc., and this the age of sail and early steam. So anyway, let me get the hull done here, and then once I've got the hull sort of in some sort of state, I shall be back. So see you shortly. So what I have constructed to this point is the basic hull of our new, well, don't call it a cruiser, but it's a battleship cruiser, but not quite a battle cruiser, but maybe cruiser. We've got sort of like this will be our citadel area. So you can see all of the items to be protected will go in this area with a bit of armour. It's a secondary armour layer for anything that's in this area, so it has to get through the initial external 3 blocks, the air gap that we have in each section, except for a little bit of lack of air gap there, but that should be fine. And then finally another armoured section before whatever we put into this section would get attacked. The hull itself is quite large. It's already 25,000. We've put nothing else in here, and we're already at 25k. It's going to take a while to build. Length 92, that's big but not massive. It is very much larger than anything else that's in the campaign at the moment, except for the base. And the plan is to put a couple of large double cram cannons in this sort of locations. They'll go down into the protected area with most of their loaders and ammo. There's always a chance of a turret detonation, so they'll be protected a little bit, but there's limitations of how protected they'll be. And then I'm not going to have the gun deck, so this level here will be our armour section. And at the moment, if I just fill in the back, so we get the air pocket, the bottom section, just to show down in this hull, is let's go. It's full of resource. It's been segmented, but it's mainly full of resource containers and some dotted around some ammo. But it's also a wet area. So if I take out the caps lock that's holding it in the air, this center section is going to be air pumped. And if I just put a beam in here just to seal off this area for the moment, that's going to need a 2 beam, and that's possibly going to need a 1 block, I think, just to make it seal. And then we will put some air pumps into each of these sections as well, just to pump out all the air. There we go. So it's sort of staying buoyant with the air taken out of these areas. So this will be our main alleyway for getting in and out of areas. Is it showing as breached? Bear with me 1 second. Nope, not quite breached yet. Now I'm thinking once we put a lot of weight on the top, because we're going to be putting a load of turrets and there'll be other weapons on the top here, this is going to get fairly top heavy. That will bring the water line down to, I'm reckoning, around this level. I'm reckoning buoyancy will go around there, and we'll have to put some more lead, an extra weight on the bottom to make sure it doesn't turn over. And although we could use PIDs and we can use stabilizers, I'd like to try and do it as a natural design will allow it to stay relatively stable. Maybe using the PID propellers that we used on those for just stabilizing it when it's done a fire. So my next stage, I think I will look at the turrets, because this is going to be the next largest item of this ship, is going to be the turret system, because I want some fairly big guns on this, fairly large. Might as well get a good kaboom going out of these. Don't be not necessarily fast firing, just fairly long range. I am going to stick with cram cannons, although, you know, I should really start using advanced. I think we'll leave advanced for a little longer, and we'll go for crams. So let me see what I can do with a cram cannon, and I will be back soon. And welcome back to what is the DNS Warrior for the moment as a naming. So yes, I've just done quite a lot. It was more than just the hull. I've done a whole lot of work on this. So what have we got? Now, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's quite a fun ship. It's not designed to be totally defensive or offensive, because it is intended to use the drones for its defensive measures, really. So there's a lot of bits missing. So it's got some nice guns. So 4 turrets of those with some nice big cannons, which have a fairly good long range as well. So they can fire out and take on some of the big targets. A couple of slightly smaller, just higher rate of fire guns for close-in work, and they are designed to only really shoot at closer enemies. And that we have a separate AI, a separate mainframe, and I've named them. Captain Drake is in charge of the main guns and the general navigation, and then Lieutenant Horatio is after the secondary guns, and his mainly priority is those which are closer. And we've also got some autocannons just for anything that gets really close, just to get a little bit of damage in. Now, yes, these are not going to do that much damage to an enemy, but as I say, the primary is to get the drones doing most of the work. Now, we've got 6 drone bays inside. There is an area, if I can find it, here we go, with 6 docking bays and 6 spawners, so we can create our drones and attach them to those and sort those out. So when it actually spawns in, it will spawn in all the drone ships. Speed wise, yeah, 7 meters a second is good enough for this. It tries to keep at a good 2,000 meters range, so it doesn't want to get too close. It wants to stay at range. Armor wise, it's good enough. It will work against some of the other larger ships. What have we got down here as far as just layout? We've got a nice big room here which is ready to contain any other equipment I can think of. The AI room, as you can imagine, this is the main AI which does most of the detection and handles most of the navigation. Let's see, that's the drone room, then the cannon, and then finally at the back we are steam powered here. We're a combination of electrical power, so we've got electrical batteries which hold most of the electrical charge for the vehicle, and then we've got 2 types of engine. We're all controlled by control blocks. So at the moment, as an example, the boilers are not burning any material, and this is how you can make the boilers be efficient. So they're boiling no material. Now, if the battery goes below 80%, then these boilers will turn on, and then they will start charging up the battery. Once the battery is above 95%, they'll turn off, and this will set it down to 0. This particular setup is for additional combat power. So this has a controller. Where are we? Just here. So if the battery goes below 70%, which means that these cannot keep up with the requirement, this will turn on and start producing extra power using these pistons. And then once again, it will turn off once the battery is above 90%, which means that it's supplying enough power to be able to charge the battery and also do whatever's needed. So we've got the potential for quite a bit of power from here, but it does burn resources, but that's the name of it. resource production. It can hold 200, quarter of a million resources. That's more resources than the actual ship is, because the ship is only 66,000, which is 67,000, which is a little bit more than I would like, but it's a mothership, so it's supposed to be big. Yes, I've got sails on here because I felt like it. The main propulsion is a couple of propellers down the back, but the sails add a little bit of propulsion. They've also got some heat decoys and a radar dish on here. What else have we got that's of interest? Some missile interceptors, just to hopefully try and take out any missiles that get close. Now, I did have quite a bit of problems balancing this, and I've used a few different options to keep it level. The recoil of these guns, but also it's very top heavy. It should really be a bit wider. I should have made this maybe about 3 blocks wider. That would have, for the amount of metal we've got here, that would have made it a little bit more stable. The height to width is not great. It's about even, and really the width should be twice the height. So you can see I've got a very big keel here, which is a lot of stone, which is the primary ballast for it, but I've had to also put some PID with some propellers just to force it to try and stay a little bit more level, which is working okay. Now let's just see what it's like without drones. Just see what it's like on its own, just to see what these guns are like. So let me come off here and we'll give it the good old Marauder. Where are we? Let's just go down to here, give it a Marauder just to see how quickly you can take that out. So it's aiming over now. Here come the shells. Oh, first one's missed, but that's okay. It is manoeuvring. I've set the AIs to be take quite a while to work out their direction of shot. That looks like the small cannons having a go, and here's the big cannons, and yeah, they're making a bit of a mess. It'll only take a few. I've tested it against some even bigger ships, and it's quite alright. And defensive wise, we just took a hit, and it damaged a bit of the armour, but that's all being nicely repaired. So a little bit more ballast on the bottom, and that actually just did right it. So it was okay after just a little bit of reworking. So it's a work in progress, but this should be good enough to go out and take out some of the smaller areas with a few of the drone ships. Some are either the cannon or the new improved cannon and laser ribs. So hopefully in the next episode we'll see some combat against some of the deep water guard ships, and hopefully we'll see some of their new designs. So any comments? A good name for the ship or this class of vessel would be appreciated. Hope you like the design. It's sort of semi-classical, based upon some of the early turreted sailing steamships. I think it was HMS Warrior. Anyway, there's a few sorts of designs that had this sort of design. There was actually a very famous one that basically capsized. Which actually, looking at it, this ship is very close to doing, because very often it's almost capsized a few times. But anyway, it's a bit of fun. Any other suggestions for ships? I'm going to sort of go historically through, and we'll eventually end up with some very modern stuff, and then we'll go into futuristic at some point when we're going against some of the more difficult factions. Anyway, until next time, leave the comments down below, keep playing the game, and above all, have fun.